The storm started just after sunset. Rain slammed against my apartment windows so hard it sounded like gravel being thrown by angry hands. Lightning flashed across the sky every few seconds, turning the dark streets white before dropping them back into shadow again. I had just finished making coffee when my phone rang. It was my sister, Emily. The second I answered, I heard crying. "Not hers, babies." Then her voice followed, trembling so badly I almost didn't recognize it. "Ryan, please." My stomach tightened instantly. "Emily, what happened? They locked us out. For a moment I thought I heard her wrong. What? Mom and Dad locked us outside." She choked on a sob. "The babies are freezing." I grabbed my keys before she even finished speaking. 10 minutes later, I turned onto my parents' street, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the storm. Their large white house stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, glowing warmly from inside like something out of a holiday movie. But on the front porch sat my sister, curled against the wall, holding her newborn twins beneath a soaked blanket. I slammed the car into park and ran through the rain. Emily. She looked up with red, swollen eyes. Her lips were pale from the cold. One of the babies cried weakly, while the other barely moved at all. Rage exploded inside me. What the hell happened? Emily tried to stand, but her legs shook too hard. I told them no. She whispered, "No to what?" She stared toward the front window. Inside the house, I could actually see our mother standing near the curtains, watching us, warm, dry, safe, while her daughter and grandchildren sat freezing outside. Emily's voice cracked. Dad wanted access to Jason's insurance money. Jason, her husband, dead only 3 months after a highway accident left her a widow at 28. They said they were only trying to help me manage it. She continued. But when I refused to sign the papers, Dad got angry. Another lightning strike lit the porch, and I saw bruises on her wrist. Something inside me snapped. I marched to the front door and pounded so hard the frame shook. A few seconds later, Dad opened it with an annoyed expression, like I was interrupting his evening. "You need to calm down," he said immediately. I laughed in disbelief. "Calm down. You locked your daughter and newborn grandchildren outside during a storm. They're being dramatic." Mom called from the hallway. Emily flinched at the sound of her voice. Dad crossed his arms. "Your sister is emotionally unstable since Jason died. She needs discipline, not sympathy." I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. "Discipline," I repeated. "Those babies are weeks old. They wouldn't even be out there if she'd listened." He snapped. That was it. Years of swallowed anger rose to the surface all at once. The favoritism, the manipulation, the constant emotional abuse disguised as parenting. I suddenly remembered every cruel thing they'd ever done to Emily, criticizing her weight, controlling her relationships, making her feel weak for having emotions. Jason had been the first person who truly loved her, and now that he was gone, they were trying to control what little she had left. "You don't deserve to call yourselves parents," I said coldly. Dad's face hardened. "If you walk away supporting her behavior, don't bother coming back." Behind me, thunder cracked through the sky. I looked at Emily holding her babies in soaked blankets. Then I looked back at him, for the first time in my life. I said, "That sounds like a gift." I stepped inside, only long enough to grab Emily's diaper bag from the hallway. Mom scoffed as I passed her. "She'll come crawling back," she muttered. I stopped near the door and turned toward her. "No," I said quietly. "But someday you're going to wish she did." Then I walked out. That night, while the storm raged outside my apartment, Emily finally fell asleep on my couch with one baby on her chest and the other beside her. And as I watched them sleeping peacefully for the first time in hours, I made a promise. My parents had spent their entire lives protecting their reputation. I was going to be the reason they lost it. By morning, the storm had passed. Sunlight filtered through my apartment windows, calm and warm, like the night before had never happened. But the moment I walked into the living room and saw Emily asleep on the couch with her twins beside her, the anger returned instantly. She looked exhausted, not just tired, broken. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and even in sleep, her face carried tension, like her body no longer knew how to relax. One tiny baby rested against her chest while the other slept in a basket beside the couch. They deserved peace, safety, love, things our parents had never truly given either of us. I quietly made coffee when Emily suddenly spoke without opening her eyes. "You don't have to stay angry for me." I leaned against the counter, too late. Her eyes slowly opened. "They're still our parents, Ryan." That sentence used to mean something to me once. Growing up, we were trained to protect the family image no matter what happened behind closed doors. Dad always said, "Respect matters more than feelings." And Mom treated reputation like religion. The outside world believed they were generous, respected people. Dad owned a successful accounting business. Mom organized charity events and church fundraisers. Everyone praised them. Nobody knew the truth, or maybe nobody wanted to. They threw you and newborn babies into a storm. I said quietly, "There's no excuse for that." Emily looked away. "Dad wasn't always this bad." Yes, he was. The words came out harder than I intended. But they were true. For years, Emily got blamed for everything. If Dad lost his temper, it was because she provoked him. If Mom insulted her appearance, it was constructive criticism. They controlled her finances, tracked her relationships, and constantly reminded her how fragile she was. Jason changed that. I remembered the first time I met him. Calm voice, kind smile, steady eyes. He treated Emily like she mattered. And for the first time in her life, she believed it too. Then he died, and our parents moved in fast. At first, they pretended to help. Dad offered to manage the insurance payout. Mom insisted Emily and the babies temporarily stay at their house. To outsiders, it looked loving. Now I understood the real plan, control. That afternoon, while Emily rested, I drove to my parents' neighborhood to collect more of her belongings. The second I arrived, I noticed curtains moving in nearby houses. People were watching. An older neighbor named Mrs. Delgado stepped outside while I loaded boxes into my trunk. "I'm glad your sister is safe," she said softly. I paused. "You knew." Her expression darkened. "Honey," the entire street heard the babies crying. My hands tightened around the box. She begged them to open the door. Mrs. Delgado continued quietly. "Your mother turned the television louder." For a second, I couldn't breathe. Another neighbor approached slowly, then another, and suddenly stories started spilling out. Dad screaming at Emily after Jason's funeral. Mom telling people Emily was mentally unstable. Arguments about money. One neighbor even admitted she'd seen Dad carrying folders from Emily's room late at night. "You should check her credit," she warned carefully. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. That evening, after Emily fed the twins and finally smiled for the first time all day, I sat alone at my kitchen table with my laptop open. I started searching through public records, bank documents, business filings, property transfers. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then I found a loan connected to Emily's name. My heartbeat slowed. She had never mentioned a loan. But there it was, opened nearly 2 years earlier, signed by our father, and suddenly I realized something terrifying. The storm wasn't the worst thing they'd done to her. It was only the first thing I had discovered. 2 weeks after the storm, my parents acted like nothing had happened. That was the part that disgusted me most. Not the lies, not even the cruelty. It was how easily they returned to smiling in public, while Emily still woke up shaking from nightmares every night. The twins were finally healthier, though. Tiny and fragile, but stronger than before. My apartment had become crowded with diapers, bottles, blankets, and sleepless nights. But somehow it also felt warmer than it ever had. Emily sat near the window one afternoon rocking baby Noah while I reviewed documents on my laptop. "You're doing it again," she said quietly. I looked up. Doing what? Obsessing. I sighed and closed the screen halfway. "I found 3 more loans connected to your name." The color drained from her face. "What? All opened while you were married to Jason? That's impossible." I turned the laptop toward her carefully. "Dad used his company address on 2 of them." Emily stared at the screen like it was written in another language. Then her eyes slowly filled with tears. "He promised he was helping us," she whispered. That sentence hurt more than anger ever could. Because she still wanted to believe there had once been love underneath all the manipulation. But people who love you don't steal from you. 3 days later, Mom called for the first time since the storm. I answered on speaker while Emily folded baby clothes beside me. "Ryan," Mom said sweetly, her voice dripping with fake concern. "We think this family tension has gone on long enough." I nearly laughed. "We're hosting our anniversary dinner Saturday," she continued. "Important people will be there. Church friends, business clients, relatives. Your father wants the family together." Translation: rumors had started spreading. Dad's perfect reputation was cracking, and now they needed a performance. Emily shook her head immediately, silently begging me to say no. But suddenly, an idea formed in my mind. "A dangerous one will come," I said. Emily's eyes widened in panic after the call ended. "Ryan, no." I leaned forward calmly. "Trust me." Saturday night arrived cold and clear, the storm long gone. My parents' house glowed with golden lights while expensive cars lined the street outside. Through the windows, I could already see guests laughing with champagne glasses in hand. The perfect family image. Exactly what Dad wanted. Emily trembled beside me before we entered. "You don't have to do this." I told her softly. "Yes, I do," she whispered. The room fell awkwardly quiet when we walked in. Some guests looked relieved to see Emily alive and healthy. Others looked uncomfortable, which meant the rumors were already spreading faster than my parents realized. Mom rushed over dramatically. "There they are," she announced loudly, hugging Emily before she could react. "We've been so worried about you." Emily froze. Dad approached seconds later wearing his polished businessman's smile. "There's my grandson," he said, reaching toward Noah. Emily stepped back instantly. For the first time, I saw something flicker in Dad's eyes. Fear. Dinner dragged on with forced laughter and fake kindness. Dad made emotional speeches about family unity. Mom dabbed fake tears while guests nodded sympathetically. Then dessert arrived and I stood up. "I actually prepared something tonight, too," I announced. Dad's smile faltered. Across the room, I connected my phone to the television mounted above the fireplace. "What is this?" Mom asked sharply. I didn't answer. The security footage began playing, black and white video from their front porch camera. Rain crashing sideways, Emily standing outside holding her newborn twins, begging, crying, pounding weakly on the locked door. Inside the video, Dad's voice could even be heard yelling, "Maybe now you'll learn respect." The room went dead silent. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then the footage showed the most horrifying part of all. My mother walking to the window, looking directly at the crying babies and closing the curtains. Gasps spread across the room. Mom turned pale instantly. "That's not. You locked your daughter and newborn grandchildren outside during a winter storm," I said coldly. "Because she refused to give you control of her dead husband's money." Dad stood up violently. "Turn this off." But I wasn't finished. I pulled another document onto the screen: bank records, loan statements, Emily's stolen identity. And as the guests stared at my parents in horror, their perfect reputation finally began to collapse. Nobody spoke for nearly 10 seconds after the final document appeared on the television screen. The silence felt heavy, deadly. My father stood frozen beside the dining table while guests stared at him with open disbelief. My mother's face had completely lost color, her carefully practiced smile finally gone. Then the whispers started. Quiet at first, then louder. Oh my God, they used her identity. Those poor babies. One of Dad's business partners slowly pushed his chair back from the table. Another guest grabbed her purse immediately, and suddenly the room that once worshipped my parents began pulling away from them like they were contagious. Dad pointed at me with shaking rage. You ungrateful little bastard. There it is, I said calmly. The real you. Mom suddenly burst into fake tears. We were trying to help Emily. She's emotionally unstable after Jason's death. Stop, Emily whispered. The room went silent again. My sister stood slowly from her chair, clutching baby Noah against her chest, while Ava slept peacefully in her carrier beside her. For the first time in years, Emily looked directly at our parents without fear. You always say I'm unstable whenever I stop obeying you, she said softly. You told people I was weak my entire life because it made controlling me easier. Mom opened her mouth, but Emily continued. When Jason died, I thought maybe losing him would finally make you love me. Tears filled her eyes. Instead, you saw an opportunity. Dad slammed his fist against the table. Everything we did was for family. No, I said sharply. Everything you did was for power. A church elder near the fireplace slowly shook his head in disgust. Those babies could have died out there. That sentence destroyed whatever remained of my parents' image. One by one, guests started leaving. Nobody hugged my mother goodbye. Nobody shook Dad's hand. People avoided even looking at them as they walked out the door. Within minutes, the massive anniversary party became a graveyard of half-eaten food, abandoned wine glasses, and shattered pride. Dad turned toward me with pure hatred burning in his eyes. You think you've won. I stared back coldly. No, I think Emily survived. That mattered more. We left without another word, and for the first time in years, my sister smiled during the drive home. Not a forced smile, not a nervous one, a real one. 3 months later, the consequences finally caught up to our parents completely. Dad lost several major clients after the scandal spread online. Someone from the anniversary dinner leaked the security footage, and people were horrified. Church committees quietly removed Mom from every charity position she held. Relatives who once ignored Emily suddenly reached out apologizing for years of silence. But the final blow came through court. The loans Dad opened using Emily's identity triggered a fraud investigation. Turns out there were more forged documents than we realized. Much more. By the time lawyers finished uncovering everything, Dad's company was drowning in legal problems. Mom tried desperately to defend him publicly, but nobody believed her anymore. Their reputation, the only thing they truly loved, collapsed piece by piece. Meanwhile, Emily began rebuilding her life. Using what remained of Jason's insurance money, we found a small, peaceful house on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, but it had large windows, warm sunlight, and a nursery painted soft yellow for the twins. Safe, that word mattered now. One evening, I visited after work and found Emily sitting on the living room floor, while Noah and Ava crawled clumsily across a blanket toward her. The sound of their laughter filled the house, real laughter, not fear, not tension, love. Emily looked up at me quietly. Do you think Mom and Dad regret it? I watched the twins giggle beside her. Then I remembered that freezing storm night, the locked door, the crying babies, the curtains closing. And I shook my head. No, I said honestly, I think they regret getting exposed. Emily looked down for a moment. Then she smiled softly at her children. Good, she whispered, because I don't regret leaving.